Yeah, hi. This is your old pal Eshkalar, and I think this is what Valentine's Massacre Day or something. I know. I knew they were slaying the chocolates earlier. You said. So anyway, today I'm going to talk about something important. This is an addendum to my Mything Person series, and today I want to say that maybe we got it wrong. Because we talk about your Greek gods, and then we talk about your Roman gods, then we talk about your various African tradition gods, right? The gods of the Yoruba, the gods that you know, and the gods of the Aztecs and the Mayans and the Olmecs and the Toltecs and the Wheat Checks and the Rice Checks and the what am I? Oh, so anyway, I got to ask a question today, specifically because of the Romans, which we all love because they're the ones that made us write Greek. What? That's the dumbest thing ever. CH, is it K? Is it Cha? Is it Sha? Oh, use the Greek alphabet, you nerds. So anyway, Greek's got a perfectly good kappa. You don't. Latin doesn't because it's incomplete. It's inadequate to the task of taxonomy. So anyway, so all these different kinds of gods, there's Amaterasu and Taoism, and there's Shangti and northern Chinese, right? The Wudang Mountains have all those Taoist temples, and he's the supreme member of the celestial bureaucracy. Yeah, he's like the king. So, but everywhere you go, you'll find there's a hierarchy of mythological creatures, of which there's like a father or a mother god, and there's all the little gods and the baby gods, and the gods coming over from school, the monsters and the demons and the naga, and the divas. So here's my question: since the Romans took and they did a thing called syncretization, is that a great word or what? Syncretization. Hey, I'm gonna syncretize you, baby. Oh, I hope you brought drugs. So what that means is to take the similar elements between your thing and his thing, and you blend them. Now I have a different name for that. I call it cultimulturalism. Think it through. Cultimulturalism. Yeah, that's the funniest joke ever. It's not even mine, but it's a worthy joke. So, at any rate, Sapir and Murphy, good job, guys. That was one of the great jokes of all time. It come through your heads, thanks. So, at any rate, it's cultimulturalism. It's also called syncretization. You bring the elements together till you say, well, there are no Greek gods, or the Greek gods were just our gods with Greekified names. See? Like maybe we did that with some of the old pagan gods and called them saints in the old days, but who's counting anyway, right? Because we're not allowed to worship saints because that would be coming between us and God. Isn't there a thing about that? I'm pretty sure. So, just a point to make on the way by. So here's my question for you. Do you, or do you not think that there were all these different systems, one for each people, or was it perhaps kind of a crippled memory, a racial memory, a species memory, if you will, and if you won't, perhaps a cultural, an oral tradition memory, ouch, that was carried through a diaspora that were somewhere and then went elsewhere? And then there are all these similar elements, not in their languages, though there are in certain cases in certain ways, but no, not their languages globally, but their mythological structures globally. Is it that man, no matter where he is, no matter who he is, looks for answers in a certain way? Or is it that the same answers were found by the same men, and that this is what remains of those moments when, so to speak, giants trod the earth? That's whole story about the Nephilim. You guys can go home on that because all it is they're trying to interpret the bones they found in the ground. The same thing with the Titanomachy, don't you get it? You find a skeleton of a Tyrannosaurus in the ground, you're like, okay, priest, what the hell? He's like, oh, I better think quick around out of the job. The gods I talk about all the time. They had this big war, and they had this war with these giant demons. Look at the teeth on that sucker. Look at that. Imagine your kid in his mouth. He used to feed kids to that guy. Yeah. Yeah, he's called Baal with the big teeth. And, and so, and then God had a fight with him, and he hit him so hard, bang, smacked him right into the stone there. That's kind of how that happens, I think. And maybe it doesn't, but it doesn't in the magical universes. And I'm going to ask you scientists out there, is this a magical universe? No? So it doesn't happen here, does it? No, it doesn't. So what you have is you have these remnants in the ground, and when people come across them, they go to the local priest and they say like, well, what? You know everything, right? You told us that God told you special stuff and that we should give you money because God only tells you special stuff. We don't understand why, because you're trying to sleep with our daughters, so why does it make you special? But anyway, the point comes up over and over again that, you know, Zeus is a lot like other sky gods elsewhere. You know, mottled by playing a game of operator where the oral tradition tries to keep it truthful, but as you gain the, the distractions of a diaspora, those things change. Your exigencies change. Your cultural narrative changes. And so the stories of your gods and goddesses, the guidons of your moral and ethical structure, change as well to fit the new situation. And then you conveniently forget about it because that's what people do. We forget about inconvenient things. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so here's your question. Was it the same guys and they did something a long time ago and the stories we get from the various religious traditions somehow append to their real history? Like Göbekli Tepe, maybe stories from that time and the peoples that gathered there then like scattered off to their different places when the climate changed and still tell those stories. But they have grown and changed and evolved in the telling because of the 12,000 years between then and now. And the fact that no human memory is perfect, not even yours. I know, I saw you trying to test it. You knew as well as I did that you were bound to fail eventually. But I admire your effort and I think your memory is wonderful. You know who you are. So I think we are at the end of this story. That the pantheons are one pantheon. And in some cases, perhaps one person. But I'm going to postulate for you, because you're in a non-magical universe, what this might have been. When your universe was younger, it was magical, because that's the breakdown. The magical elements are, they break down just like your radionuclides, but they release higher level binding energies in the form of kells. So you get your usual cascaded particles, but you also get these kells released. Those kells are the gauge particle of the standing magical field, and that's from which wizards do work in the real world by tapping into the standing magical field. It's like the 26th or 27th quantum field. It depends on which universe I'm in, because they come up with them at different times in a different order. So it's very likely that what we're hearing in all these stories is we're hearing one story. And for some reason, apparently man was pretty close together once upon a time, or men went from different cultures without being killed and eaten, or maybe after they told the story they were killed and eaten, who knows how that works. And they either carried these stories around firsthand with their peoples forever, or travelers carried those stories along, because having a good story is always good when you go to meet people and you try to get them to not eat you, and you want to tinker their pots or sing them a song or whatever it is you're doing when you're traveling. In many situations, in many civilizations, you wouldn't want to travel because traveling was dangerous. And even living in the place where you lived might not be too cool, but it was better than traveling. So anyway, I'm going to postulate this idea that the many pantheons were one pantheon, and the deeds that have come down to us very distorted by a 12,000, 18,000 year old oral tradition, 10,000 years before we started writing anything down. And then the people that did write them down wrote a lot of things down pretty much so similar you get scared sometimes. So different, well, you think like maybe not. And then a scientist will tell you, oh, it's this. And another scientist 20 years later says, oh, it's that. And you're like, tradition. There is none. Chaos rules. So that was it. That's it. I think there was just one pantheon. And what it was, who knows? Alien monsters, doing stuff on Earth. I don't know. Right? Because I don't know what your Earth was like. Back in my original world, which we call the Western world, those of us that survived it, we had a timeline like that. We had a creation of the world. There were literal deities that people worshipped and got spell energies from it. I don't know how to tell you, but when they say don't make a deal with the devil, you might say that in any place and time, somebody's God might be somebody else's devil. And so it might behoove you to not make a deal with anybody if you don't have to. And once you do, well, it's a crapshoot. Because how do you know that one guy's story is the same as another guy's? How do you know that one guy thinks he's telling you the truth, but he's lying? Or he's distorted the truth so badly that no one can ever get the real truth back. Like losing data in a black hole. There's another question for you. Do you ever lose the memory that there was that much mass or energy in the energy budget of the universe? Or is it like somehow recorded so that as the black hole evaporates, and they do. They evaporate by what I like to call Hawker radiation. Every so often they blow off a big loogie, and all the life and all the stars around it die. So, but yeah, do you lose that information? Do you lose the information that once upon a time there was X amount of mass, and that was fed into the black hole, and the black hole generated so much excess Hawking radiation energy, whatever. So much of it was wasted, so much of it was spread throughout the universe to make it even, to make everything lawful. People that worship law, you don't realize what law wants is death. Only chaos honors life, creativity, uniquity. And you don't even have a word for that. I had to make it up. This is Eshkalar, your old pal on Valentine's Day. If you really love your old pal Eshkalar, have a nice day today. Because, there's a girl that he's sweet on, and there's some people he really loves to be around. But if they're having a good time without him, well, that's okay, isn't it? This stand-up philosopher stuff is tough. I don't know how Wild Bill does it. This is your old pal Eshkalar. Valentine's Day, 2023. Step up to the line. Pilgrims of short muskets, please stand close to the firing line.